Professions in Theory and History, Rethinking the Study of the Professions. And today, the newest book of Professor Rольf Торштендаль we plan to discuss. There exist a number of good and well-known books on the problem of professions. I think the first one, or the most well-known, is the book of Andrew Abbott, The System of Professions. Then the books of Harold Perkin, The Rise of Professional Society, and the other book is The Third Revolution, Professional Elites in the Modern World. The book of Burton Clark, which was a public rating, because it was devoted to academic professions, and it is called the academic profession. And well known to us, thanks to Mikhail Sokolov, the book of Tony Becher and Paul Crowler, Academic Tribes and Territories. And finally, we have a book about historical professionalism, which is very important for all of us. Just a few words about the format of today's meeting. There are two ways to celebrate the publication of the book. You can arrange just a celebration and say a lot of nice words to the author. And usually I am in favor of this kind of celebration. You can discuss the book or talk about the problems which it addresses. The book was happily published a week ago, but nobody had a chance to read it. So it would seem that we have no choice but to celebrate. Still, it would be a long decision, I think, as the topic of the book, the rise and propagation of historical professionalism, is too important to academic historians and is in line with our own research. Therefore, I propose a mixed genre for today. It will be regular ИГИТИ seminar from the publication of the book. So let's keep a festive mood and make compliments to the author. A few words about time schedule. I think the presentation of Professor Rольf Торштендаль, as we really need to understand the main ideas of the book and his position, will take 35-40 minutes. Then a round of short questions to clarify unclear points, and then we pass to the discussion. And about language, probably if somebody feels that he is much more eloquent and convincing in Russian, Tamara Торштендаль will help us translating Professor Торштендаль in Swedish. So you're welcome to start.
Thank you so much. Many thanks for inviting me here to give a presentation, and thank you all who have come here to listen to this and to take part in this discussion, which I hope it will be. I think it would be no sense of having a meeting just to make compliments to the author. That is not what I strive for, but I want you to object and to discuss the points that you find doubtful or interesting. That is what I would like and what I hope for. I will start by saying that one fundamental notion in my book is the difference between changes in professionalism and, on the other hand, professionalization. Professionalization, also among historians, is often discussed in history of historiography as something that's taking place. We can send that around. I can only send it around because I got the first copies only the other day. I had thought that it would come much earlier so that you could have had a chance to see anything. But anyway, you can at least see the book. Okay, professionalization is taken as to be a process from zero to full. That is, seen from your side, that starting here with zero and going up to full professionalism when it's evening out. That process is the process of professionalization. It's so you can read in many books, but I instead look at what happened between 1830 and the present as three phases of historical professionalism. 1830s to 1880s was one phase, 1880s to 1950s another, and from 1950s to the present a third. I will go into the sense of this more deeply a little bit further on. But let me start by saying that professionalism was something that has been occupying my mind for a very long time. I've in fact worked with a number of sociologists on this thing, and I've edited 2 books which were not mentioned by Irina Sevelyeva, but which were published in 1990, I think, both of them. And these are on professionalism. And a number of the then leading sociologists in the world took part in that project, which I led in the Swedish Collegium for Advanced Study of the Social Sciences, and wrote in these books. But that was when neo-Weberian thoughts dominated the theory of professionalism. This has now faded out, but names as Randall Collins and Magalisa Fatih-Larsson may perhaps mean something to some of you. Anyway, I have worked with these but okay, before I get further, I want to draw your attention to something that may be interesting, and that is that a partly parallel book to this one, which is circulated here, also authored by me, is to be published soon through a Russian publisher and through Larina Repina, who has taken care of this. It will be called Основы знаний и профессионализма историков. But I want to stress that that is another book, and only some parts of the 2 books are identical. There are some, but only some. Others have a keen content, and others are totally different, and there are specific parts in both books which has no counterpart at all in the other one. The present book, The Rise and Propagation of Historical Professionalism, is characterized by the fact that it borrows viewpoints from 2 disciplines for the analysis, which goes through different chapters. And first of all, that is sociology, where I have had a foothold for some while. I treat historians as a social group, discerning the group's professionalism with direct reference to sociological discussions. And you should take note of that the phenomenon of professionalism, historical professionalism as well as other professionalism, is much older than the term, the sociological term. Professionalism as a sociological term can be said to have come into usage in the 1930s. So that is Andrew Abbott, whom Irina Sevelyeva mentioned, who has written in the International Encyclopedia of Social and Behavioral Sciences about the history of professionalism. The professionalism of historians, like other groups of professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, nurses, etc., is characterized by the group's community traits. Community is really a very important word in this connection. A shared value base and strict norms for what is permitted is valid for each of these professional groups. As you may well be aware, this is so with doctors and lawyers, but it is so more or less strictly for every one of the professional groups. But researchers in several disciplines, established researchers, are used to regard themselves as professionals. Researchers are lacking some of the characteristics of professional practitioners. They have no clients and they do not practice in the normal sense of the word. And let me say also that when I say researchers, I do that more or less in opposition to Burton Clark, who was also mentioned here before, because Burton Clark talks about one academic profession. And I think that rectors, deans, professors even, and lecturers, they are different sorts, or what may be said to be part of one different form of profession, but anyway, it's not like researchers. For many reasons, they're rather state officials in most cases, or officials of some sort. I can continue on that if you want me to, but I leave that to the discussion. The other external, so to say, discipline that I borrow from and which I have used a lot is philosophy. When I deal with historical works, I analyze them from a philosophical rather than a historical point of view, less for their main content on history than for their form and their epistemological consequences and presuppositions. I also try to outline a philosophical basis for the analysis of professional contributions to historiography. That is, such historical works that contribute with new historical knowledge. I use the concepts minimum demands and optimum norms, which I have developed long earlier and which I have used for several years now. As regards minimum demands, I discern 4 categories. The first is deficiencies in logical consistency, and that may seem very, very simple, but as it is evident mainly in the use of concepts, it is so that it is easy to trap oneself and give rise to contradictions when one uses the same concept in the beginning and at the end of a long book. The second category is a lacking possibility to check the empirical basis or if the author makes mistakes in the handling of sources or statements of factual circumstances, which both lead to a lack of intersubjective empirical reliability. The latter is the important part of it. There must be an intersubjective empirical reliability. The third type of faults minimum demands that may not be disregarded, is a deficient internal coherence insofar as it is not clear in which way one particular argument is relevant for a specific result, or in which way a result is relevant for other arguments and results. That is also important, and it happens not very seldom that there is a lacking coherence between the beginning and the end of the book. You may have observed that yourselves. And the fourth criterion, or the fourth category of such force against minimum demands, is a lack of new results, in the sense that everything that is stated as results of the new investigation has, in fact, already been stated by other researchers in investigations which are beyond doubt from a professional point of view. All these four categories seem very simple and self-evident, but nonetheless you can find many reviews where the reviewer points out that here is such a fault. Thus, minimum demands are much more than is usually understood as historical method, source analysis and source criticism, etc., which is a subcategory among the norms that give rise to objections of the second category, the lacking possibility to check the empirical basis, and that lead to a lack of intersubjective empirical reliability. Oh, now I have forgotten this. What I understand with optimum norms are such norms that are derived from professed values and prescribe what is fruitful. Important or promising are possible alternatives to fruitful in research and results. The two concepts, minimum demands and optimum norms, play a great role in my analysis of the historical development of historical professionalism, which occupies the main part of the book, and I will very soon get into it. But I must first also mention that I have tried to develop instruments for the analysis of the actual process of professional work. There I have borrowed the main ideas from a British philosopher, Peter Lipton, and I have sketched in this book how his concept, inference to the best explanation, can be used to analyze what historians in fact do. I have discerned 6 types of new results, and I will not go into the details of each of them because that will lead too far, but I will just mention quickly what they are about. The first is very simple, that is, a new result is giving additional knowledge that provides new answers to previously posed questions. And this is that people have discussed the phenomenon and someone finds new sources for it or makes a new analysis of old sources, which leads to new answers to the questions. But then there are 4 different types of new perspectives, and you can summarize them as new perspectives. New perspectives can be given from different starting points, and there are quite enormous differences between them. I have taken examples from Emmanuel Leroy-Laduré's Montaillou, Robert Darnton and Carlo Ginzburg, who have written on Carlo Ginzburg has written on the Miller Menocchio and his world view, and Leonard Davidoff and Catherine Hall, who have written on the gender division of labour in 19th century Britain, and they are establishing a new perspective that may serve as a model for further research on parallel databases, which is important because it has been used in that way all over Europe. And then another new perspective, type of new perspective, is on complex and vast developments like the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, when people are using new types of theoretical premises for its interpretation. And I have studied that especially from with Alphonse Hollard, Albert Souboul and Georges Lefebvre on the French Revolution. And then there is a sixth category of such new results, and that is such new results that rely on some specific theoretical premises, especially the economic theoretical premises. I found very few other such results. I have taken the example of Robert Fogel and Stanley Engelman's Time on the Cross, which discusses and analyzes slavery in the American South before the abolition of slavery. And all these are very interesting types of new results. And the point that I would like to do from it is that it is possible to analyze new results with some precision through the methodology that I have developed from Peter Lipton's philosophical instrument, I would like to call it, inference to the best explanation. In fact, I have gone further, and the first fruit of this further work with historical evidencing will be published in Russian rather soon, I think, in an anthology edited by Natalia Selonskaya of the Moscow State University. And I am continuing my work with this tricky problem from both a philosophical and a practical historical perspective. But it is partly then also developed in the book. The history of historical professionalism, as I analyze it, has had three phases, as I mentioned already. These are a Rankian phase from the 1830s to the 1880s. Secondly, a methodological phase from the 1880s to the 1950s. And thirdly, a growing multitude of optimum norms from the 1950s to the present, and giving these optimum norms a priority. The historical development started after an interesting prehistory that never came beyond local historical communities, with Ranke. It started with Ranke, who gathered an unusual number of students to his lectures. Ranke had also an elite group under his personal supervision, something that was not previously heard of. This group became known as his seminar. A community was slowly appearing, gradually appearing also. For many of the students and seminar members became professors of the next generation, and several were foreigners who brought Ranke's teaching abroad. Those who were not Ranke's disciples often picked up his ideas from others, and a community that went beyond the immediate Ranke sphere was appearing. What was important for Ranke, and it seems fair to assume that he taught his disciples this, was that history formed traditions and became embedded in states and individuals. States are the important entities through their bureaucracies and their military organizations, Ranke meant, and Ranke was an institutionalist, as he saw the civil and military institutions as bearers of embedded history. And I also make a comparison with Douglas North and institutionalism in Douglas North's forms in my book. Through their power, some states dominate minor ones. State foreign policy also dominates internal politics. The primacy of foreign policy that is known as typical Ranke trait. States further form state systems, a new concept launched by Ranke in 1824, and these are structured through power and independence. This is, in short, a summary of essentials of Ranke's thoughts on history, known as his historismus. They also form his optimum norms, which made out the basis for his sort of professionalism, where historical method was only a subsidiary part. I also follow another field where Ranke played an important role in my book, the schooling into research in Europe. Starting out with disputations in the Middle Ages and their later development, I find that they never aimed at giving a specific training for research in one discipline. Disputations were faculty matters well into the 20th century. Seminars, on the other hand, were disciplinary undertakings. Ranke gave to the historical seminar a specific character. There were predecessors, especially in philology, and Ranke had taken part in one philological seminar in Leipzig in 1816. and these philological seminars were just primitive training grounds, so to say. But Ranke made something more specific of them, and his disciples followed his pattern. His influence can be traced in Scandinavia, in Russia, in North America, and probably in several other countries as well. But it's notable that both Britain and France were not within the Ranke influence spell area in the 19th century. But slowly, also there, the influence from Ranke, directly and indirectly, also grew. Johann Gustav Treusen, a personal rival to Ranke, he wanted to have Ranke's chair, and he said so in letters. And Theodor Mommsen were also school founders, but later, they started later, and they had a more local influence than Ranke, which can be concluded from Wolfgang Weber's book, Priester der Clio, which treats the schools in Germany. The three of them together, and especially Ranke, then started off a real propagation of professionalism. It was a take-off that came with a community making through education. That is very important, and education plays a very important role in the forming of the community that makes out the profession. Ranke's teaching showed what he thought was most important for historians, the historical links and state building, where he sought his optimum norms. he did not forget the minimum demands, but they were a secondary concern for Ranke. Some of his disciples made a converse priority. A prominent Ranke disciple, Georg Weitz, was among the leaders of the Monumenta Germaniae Historica, where methods were developed. And Weitz had a disciple, Ernst Bernheim, who became a trendsetter in historical method through his Lehrbuch der historischen Methode, a manual of historical method, which was published in 1889 and had a lot of later editions up to and beyond even the First World War. Two other manuals, such as Johann Gustav Reussen's Grundriss der Historik, an outline of the principles of historical method, is the best translation I've been able to find, came out in 1868, and the Introduction aux études historiques came out in 1898 by the Frenchmen Charles-Victor Langlois and Charles Sen-Dubos. And these manuals were the only real competitors to Bernheim's book, even if several others were also published in different countries, but they were often using Bernheim's book as a foundation and went on in his tracks. All three manuals made minimum demands, that is, methods in a very wide sense, the foundation of historical professionalism. They did not bother much about optimal norms, what was fruitful as research objects, and thus gave rise to a second phase of historical professionalism which focused on minimum demands from the 1880s to the 1950s. I can tell you that I was brought up in that tradition, so I know that it was still very lively in the 1950s, that it was method that mattered, nothing else. Not what you were really writing about and what sort of results you would get, but method mattered. Of course, this does not mean that professional historians did not bother at all about the fruitfulness and the importance of the themes that they dealt with in this long period of around 70 years. Many of them relied secondarily on a sort of watered-out Rankianism. Others were nationalists, even to the borderline of threatening their reputation as professionals among fellow historians. And there was another option. Economic historians made collective and organizational efforts to safeguard the importance of economic theory for their field, and they started associations, journals, and even congresses for economic history specifically. However, they did not want to sever the bonds to history in general, and also acted within the frameworks of other sorts of historians, so they lived in both spheres, so to say. But a third change of historical professionalism came with the rise of history as a social science in its first appearance with Hobsbawm at the 1950 International Congress of History. I think that Hobsbawm's activity there is very remarkable, though it has not been observed earlier, because Ertmann, Karl-Dietrich Ertmann, who is the author of a monograph on the congresses, has not written on what Hobsbawm did there, but on what the several Alarm School people did at the same congress. But Hobsbawm said directly that some of the works of historians from the of sociologists from the American side, they have really made quite a lot that historians ought to copy, ought to make as part of their own research work. Just before this, Fernand Braudel's book on the Mediterranean, as both a geographical and social space, had come out, and it was another early trendsetter, but neither the one or the other really broke through, but the most far-reaching change came in the 1960s and early 70s, with a spreading interest in Marxist theories through the New Left in England and the underdevelopment theory with André Frank and others at the top. But one should not forget counter-movements against the Marxist colouring, such as the Bielefeld School, which played a role far beyond Germany with their historical social science, historische Sozialwissenschaft, where Jürgen Kocher, Hans-Ulrich Wehler, Heinrich August Winkler and Hans-Jürgen Pohle were the most active persons. And very influential at the time. Yet these theoretical currents were, in fact, only the beginning. Gender history, global history, everyday history, microhistory, cultural history, and even political science history as a specific branch of political history soon saw the light. Common to all these, and the path breakers, of course, also of the 1950s and 70s, was that they gave a priority to optimum norms, though they were not at all unison which optimum norms that they favoured. Again, this does not mean that they discarded all minimum demands. Method was still something that they taught, but their optimum norms were very important, and they made it the central thing in education of a new generation of historians. The priority of optimum norms means also that specialization has grown in importance at the expense of overview and universalism, whatever that might mean. Efforts to write from an all-embracing perspective have generally not turned out well. Oswald Spengler and Armand Toynbee are examples, but there are other examples, such as William McNeill, who is praised by several global historians as a good professional. One may ask how the changes within the historical community took place. First of all, it is important to take note of the changes of the internal communication that have taken place from 1830 to 2014. As there is no international organization of historians that you can be a member of individually, it is important that also the national organizations who can be part of the international organization in many cases are very weak and with few members. Journals are nowadays numerous, and printed journals have difficulties, but net-based digital publications grow in number and varieties. Specialization was no enemy for the founders of the International Congresses of History. They operated with a concept of history that was universal and included investigations of all human activities. But and I will shorten up here a bit, but specialization became a point of debate in the international organization. It was thought of as something that had a limiting effect on the discussions in the congresses, and specialization became both an asset and a danger for unity and an asset for research relevance of the congresses. However, and that is important, no competitor to the European North American conception of historical professionalism has arisen. Instead, the European North American variety has won ground and spread around the world. The next International Congress in Jinan, China in 2015, the first time when a location is in a country that has not a European American heritage in the first hand in the university system, will, I think, bear witness of what is taking place. Thank you.
Thank you. Now please, short questions, just to clarify unclear points or try to extract some additional information probably. No questions?
Just to begin the discussion. So concerning the influence, the possible influence of Ranke in England, you do not take care of, for example, of William Stubbs with his Constitutional History of England, one of the most important books in the medieval history in England, but it derives possibly from Weitz, and Weitz derives possibly from Ranke somehow. You don't think here's some sort of relation?
Oh yes, I think there is a relation between Ranke and some specific individual historians in both Britain and France. In Britain, both Stubbs and Acton are purely associated with Ranke. They want to be Rankians, but they formed no schools. They had no disciples, no number of disciples, and thus this was just for them, and that did not spread Rankianism around. Acton can be said to have done a little to spread it, because he wrote about the German schools of historical research, but that was for a rather limited circle and rather also late in his career. But anyway, of course, and gradually, as I said, gradually Rankianism also won ground in both Britain and France.
What was the role of social science and especially sociology for the rise of historical professionalism, especially before Great War? What do you think about the influence of evolutionism, for example, to discuss of problem of historical determinism, evolution, and so on?
For the study of the Russian Revolution?
No, for the study of history. For example, Herbert Spencer approach to evolution.
Yeah, that was what I thought you meant. Yeah, it is. It's interesting that sociology had an influence on, shall we say, marginal people rather than on historians. Those who got this influence and furthered it, they were people who were not quite accepted in the professional historical community. I mean, in Germany it was rather Karl Lamprecht and sorry. Nowadays I'm getting older, and names fall out of my mind when I should say them. But there is another one who is also very well known. Of course, there were in France and so on people who were influenced, and Buckle was Henry Thomas Buckle was a British historian who was influenced by Comte. So, of course, there were such influences, but none of those were quite taken up in the professional community.
And maybe some inclusions Nikolai Karyev in Russia.
Thank you for your my congratulations on your book, and thank you for your presentation, very interesting, thank you. And I wonder about your opinion of dissertation. I mean, what is the role of dissertation and procedure of defending of dissertation in professionalism?
I think dissertations are very important and an interesting part of the old tradition that survived also into the new, if I may call it so, the new system of educating researchers through seminars. For this did not abolish dissertations, but in fact the procedure of dissertations was also taken over in many cases into the seminar system, and those who put forward papers on seminars, they had to defend themselves against an opponent, and there was a discussion, open discussion on it. So the best part of the old disputation system was taken over into the seminar system, and disputations have lived, are living still, beside the seminar system, which was aimed purely on one discipline at a time.
In one of your texts, there was the thesis that in one of your texts there was a statement that the authors of the books which made scientific revolutions, that the ambitions of those authors were beyond the narrative.
Yes, a new result is, as in itself, an ambition beyond the narrative. That is probably the thing that you are thinking of. I can't remember exactly what I said there, but anyways, my idea was then and is still that making new results is something that is in fact not bound to a narrative. I know that there are colleagues whom I know well and whom I have discussed this with several times, such as John Huysen, who is probably well known also here, who say the contrary to what I say. But I think that the new results are not bound to the narrative. They is rather the authors of things that expose their new results. They use narratives to make a framework in order to place their new narrative into some context, but the new narrative as such has quite other sorts of grounds than filling up a narrative, which seems to be the idea in some connections.
If I may do more questions, so the first one concerns the figure of Buckle you have just mentioned, and I'm also very interested in your interpretation of this figure concerning just the problem of professionalism, because he got no education in the normal sense of the word, and he was something staying on the margin of the historical community at first, and then became such an important person for the community, as far as I know. This is one question concerning your interpretation of professionalism and Buckle in historical professionalism, and the second question concerns the line from Ranke to Burckhardt, and maybe from Burckhardt to Georgia, a circle. That seems on the one hand something like continuation of Ranke if we look on the institutional continuity, Burckhardt as some sort of student of Ranke, on the other hand as just quite another interpretation of historicism in many aspects as as Burckhardt proposed, and his successors.
Yes, the first question I think is more simple for me to give an answer to than the other, but I will start there. Buckle had a certain schooling, but he wasn't acknowledged among historians, and you can just read the reviews in many in many journals. So then you find they are all mainly skeptical. If they are written by historians, they are devastating mostly. So he wasn't accepted, even though he had schooling. So schooling is not enough. That's also one of the ideas that I have. Schooling is not enough. You must also join the community. You must share the values of the community. If you don't, you will be ostracized. As regards Ranke and Burckhardt, I would say that Burckhardt has a double-sided relation to Ranke, as you certainly know. So he is not, he would never accept to be called a disciple of Ranke. He had ambitions far beyond that. But if you are tracing what is getting to Russia, if that was your idea, really. Or
no, rather to these German intellectuals of the early 20th century, of this conservative revolution persons around Georgia, something in this circle of him, Kantorovich and this.
Okay, yes, there were the so-called neo-Rankians, but they were, I would say, distorting the heritage from Ranke, because they let nationalism play quite another role than Ranke would have let it play. There are no evidences that Ranke ever was so nationalist as they make him. I think of Erich Marx, for example, who is one of these new Rankians, and even Max Lenz, who is certainly also in the Rankian heritage, but he is more, he has, he went further to the nationalist camp than Ranke would have ever gone. And what, as you can see from what Ranke has written on Prussia and so on, and it is also very typical that Droysen said of Ranke that he was unmanly, and he was not worthy of having a chair in Berlin, the capital of Prussia, because Prussia had quite other capabilities than, and was it should have someone who thought of the possibility of having Prussia as the capital of a bigger state, of a German state. So Preußen was rather the father of this line of thought than Ranke was, but Preußen had the limitation that he was so Prussian. He wanted Prussia to be the center of Germany.
Could I ask two questions probably? First is unplanned about Droysen. As Droysen expressed different opinions about Ranke. Sometimes he praised Ranke very highly, sometimes he was critical of him. But don't you think that Droysen's idea about historical method, under which he meant historical theory of historical perception, was an effort to safeguard history from philosophy, from vulgar sociology, from Buckle and Spencer, and yes, he wrote about it, and provide history with its own theory and with its own disciplinary autonomy by this idea.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, Droysen is a very interesting figure in the history of the historiography and the historical thinking. He wrote a very small booklet which is called Grundriss der Historik, which I translated earlier as an outline of the principles for historical method or something like that. And that was published during his lifetime. But that was also the basis of his lectures for students. And he lectured in many places, not only at his own universities. Was Kiel, and was for a rather long time it was Kiel, and later it was Berlin. But I think in between he was in Tübingen also. And but he lectured on these matters from around this book. But he had an enormous manuscript for his lectures. And this manuscript has later, much later, been edited and published, and that is the foundation of Droysen's fame as a historical theorist. But in his lifetime, he had only published this rather tiny booklet, which is interesting itself. But it does not give clear insight. So I think that his ideas are mainly expressed in his Vorlesungen and not in the things that he published in his lifetime. And I think that John Droysen, who is one of the authorities of this authorship, shares this view. He has wanted to include many other things in it. As regards Droysen's relation to Ranke, let me say that he praised Ranke when he wanted to get something out of it, according to the interpretation that has been given by Wilfried Nippel, who wrote recently, not many years ago, 5 years ago or something, a monograph on Droysen and history, which is very interesting because there one can find that he, at least, regards Droysen as totally unprincipled in his relation to Ranke.
Thank you. And the other question, let's jump to the 21st century, is about classification of sciences. there exist different classifications of sciences, official and unofficial, and there is no clarity with history in these classification systems. Sometimes it is related to social sciences and sometimes to the humanities. And what is your opinion? How do you attribute history and reasons for this attribution? Is it social science or is it one of humanities?
It's a choice I don't want to make. I have been a dean of a faculty where history was in the humanities, but I am convinced that much of what historians write is more kin to what the social sciences do than what the other humanities produce. So I would say it's, history is somewhere in between, and it is very difficult to make a good choice.
Thank you. More questions?
Maybe an easy student question from me. I'm interested in, does a professional historian have a free will? And if yes, what is it about? What is it about? Or does the professionalization process mean there is only one way to do history, historical science, and all other ways are disclaimed?
Let me say that it would be very bad if it was so that the rule system didn't leave more than one way of doing history. And especially now, you can say that in the when the minimum demands were deciding the profession, it was very difficult to make good research except in one way. If you had one specific topic, you should, it could be argued that you should get the same answer if you let two persons work with the same material on different places. But we are not in that situation any longer. When the optimum norms are, so to say, ruling history in different directions, then the historians have a lot of choices. You can just compare what people do from different points of view in areas that are more or less common to them. I mean, global historians and gender historians don't write the same things, even if they have the same material. And they don't look for the same materials. That's also important. So it is with a lot of these different bundles of optimal norms. People look for different sorts of material in order to write history, and they pose different problems. So I would say that professional free will is now much more evident than it was earlier.
Thank you for interesting presentation. And my question is, can we say generally that the concept of minimal demands is about how we achieve the historical knowledge, and the concept of optimal norms is about what is that knowledge, or what is the contents is? And if so, what theoretical advantages do we get using these concepts? Thank you.
I agree with you that in many cases the direction is given by these two types of questions, how and what. But it is not necessarily so, because you can make the how questions also the deciding thing what you must try to get an interesting type of problem for source criticism, for example. If you have to do that, then the how question has been also a what question, and you can probably find examples where you can turn the what questions into also how questions. I think that some of the global historians have done so, because they turn some concepts around in a way that makes it impossible to find counter-arguments with historical method to what they say. But these are marginal comments. In the main, I think you're right.
So we can start. No.
If I may. Have I caught your idea correctly that the globalization does not challenge the basis of the European and European American historical professionalism? Or maybe you mean just an opposite thing to that, what I claim now.
Yes, that is what I mean. It is interesting that there was once quite another start of a professionalism or something alternative professionalism, starting out from Sima Qian in China. But that was very long ago. And this petered out around 1,000 years later, around 900, 1,000 in our era. Then, since then, there are no traces that this has been continued. So now I have found nothing to indicate a rival professional system with other values than what has been brought out from starting from rankach and then from Europe to America and then further.
But the transformation of the national state in Europe and integration and such things has not changed anything in the basis elements of this historical professionalism.
No, as far as I can see, there is nothing, but you are welcome to find counterexamples. But as far as I can find, it is so that the present type of historical professionalism is the one. Of course, it has changed over, as I have exposed earlier. It has changed, and therefore there are possibilities that it has been influenced by specific traits from other sides, but I have not been aware of any such influences that have left traits that continue to be the important things in the professional structure. I think of such movements as the subaltern history movement in India, when Deepesh Chakrabarty wrote his very famous book, Provincializing Europe. That was an effort to do something to the professional system generally. But it was much more, I think he was right in the main, it was much more to give other cultures and a standard even to that of Europe, then it was to put something in instead of the heritage of Europe. But he is mentioning such things that professional historians refer constantly to the Greek past and the Greek philosophers and so on. What would happen if we, Indians, put in references to our Indian philosophers and to what has happened in India 1,000 years or 2,000 years ago? People wouldn't understand us. And so why is it that it should be the European heritage that is the determining in all these matters? And that is certainly right. I mean, that's undisputed.
Rosa Poleta, High School of Economics. Thank you very much, Professor, for your interesting presentation. That was very informative. So what I'm particularly interested in is the coherence between morality and academic history in Europe in the 20th century. So if we look at the German historiography of 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, morality played a very significant part in the discussions around the National Socialism and the legacy of National Socialism in German society.
I suffer from bad hearing. That's
sorry.
One of my problems.
So, do you regard morality as a significant part of the whole process of professionalization in Europe in the 20th century? And what is the part of morality in the development of historical studies nowadays, in your opinion? Thank you.
Thank you. Morality has an important role in the present professional historical professionalism and professional community, because historians are very occupied with such matters. And this is what is very often referred to as historical culture. And historians work with the historical culture and how history is related to moral problems. But that is not necessarily part of the relation to professionalism as such. Morality is not, in my interpretation of it, a part of the professionalism as such. The professional norms that make a research product a professional product or not. But morality is a debated subject matter. That was probably not enough for you. Or
thank you, and I think now if somebody has some comments or ideas to share with us, and especially with Professor Torштендаль on the topic. Олеся Кирчик
from the ИГИТИ. First of all, disclaimer, I am a sociologist, sociologist of science, so my question and remarks can be viewed like coming from a distant planet, probably, so take them as such. I have to say that I was very interested by texts, by chapters of your book that I could read for the seminar, and this question of professionalization and professional identity and cultures interests me a lot. And what I found like a very interesting challenge, and what you do, then you will say if I interpret it right, that you try to, on the one hand, you're criticizing some approaches in terms of professionalization and some probably more common in sociology and sociology of professions, which focus more on social or political institutional side of professions, right? And then there are more there's approaches in terms of epistemology, epistemic cultures, which we have like kind of North-Cetina in sociology of science, I mean. And what I'm trying, and it's an important question for me as researcher as well, to try to see both sides, you know, to see how exactly are related social, institutional, organizational aspects of professions, and then the epistemic aspects of professionalism. And so I think that your analysis of research, seminar, or congresses, the role of conferences goes in this direction to try to see how these both sides are articulated. But then I have an impression that sometimes you tend to probably put more emphasis on epistemology while calling it professionalism. And probably you could clarify a little bit more what you mean by norm. Because a norm, professional norm, is it's a term which has multiple meanings, and it can be moral, ethical norms, something related to ethics, or something related to formal rules, or something else. So it's not always very clear for me from reading your text. And also, as a sociologist, I would like to know your analysis, your interpretation of difference between professions like medicine or lawyers and historians or other human sciences. On the other hand, you know, in the excerpt that we had, you know, the excerpt stopped right on this point when you. So I would very much to know what you think of it, because as a sociologist, for me, it's difficult to explain this difference that historians should be should have less should have more problems to share norms precisely than lawyers or doctors or some other professions. And so, what would be your answer to that difference? I don't know if you follow me. And okay, the second point that I wanted to make is about the question of scientific revolutions in social science. And I completely agree with you with what you are writing on the subject, that there are no paradigm shifts or revolutions in social sciences, like in the sense of Kuhn, like in natural sciences, right? But there's this problem of commensurability, and that is important for Kuhn himself. But then I'm asking myself, what would be an appropriate term to why quote revolution or paradigm then? And probably it's just change of intellectual fashions, or I don't know, something else. Why not? And or shifting theories or schools. So terminologically, it's also quite unclear for me. And as a sociologist, I would like also, for me, an interesting question would be really to know the engine behind the reasons behind this change of this intellectual fashions, I don't know, or professional norms, if I use your language. If we speak about natural sciences, then one of theories, as you perfectly know, that anomalous evidence would invite us to revise theories, but it doesn't happen in history or social science. So, is there any epistemological reason for this change? And my last remark would be on your chapter on neo-institutionalism and historical turn. When you try to show that neo-institutionalist approach in economics with Douglas North would be would have many similarities with the approach of Franklin, right? And I would say that I have most problems with this statement, in fact, because for me, I would say that when economic institutionalists talk about history, even when they look at the history, it's not the history that interests them. And for instance, Douglas North has a very reduced, very limited definition of an institution, like games of rules of a game, or or like constraints or incentives on. And I would say that it would be, for me, I was really surprised by your comparison between these two thinkers. Because for me it would be more a case of incommensurability of theories, but economic neo-institutionalism would have a completely different epistemology and ontology. It was individual searching to maximize their utility, and institutions would be just, their constraints or incentives on their rational calculus and behavior. And even when Douglas North is talking about Geertz, and he doesn't take the anthropological view of institutions as complexes, cultural complexes. For me, it's a completely different thing. And to my sense, but I agree that this probably the historical method is coming back to economics and social sciences. We can find some trends, some examples, and I would just briefly mention probably two of them. For instance, one is the French economy of conventions, or French regulatory school with André Orléans and thinkers like this, who really take history seriously, who don't have this very limited or reduced definition of history, and who really strive to integrate economics to social science, because they see very clearly this divide between historical economics and other social science, and to bring historical method to economics. And another example probably would be neo-institutionalism in economic sociology or organizational studies. From the late 70s, there have been a lot of literature on historical studies of how economic institutions are produced, being transformed, etc. And the very last example could be Neil Flickstein, American sociologist, who called himself even a new institutionalist, and who uses the language of institutional entrepreneurs, and the state is very important. So I probably, I'm not a specialist of Franke, but probably you could see more similarities between his approach and the importance of the state, of the actors, to bring the change. So thank you.
Thank you, and probably we'll listen to all the comments and to answer.
I'm not sure if it's more a question or a statement. We had a very interesting discussion concerning this article which Lisa spoke of the other day about Ranke and North's concepts of path dependence. And we discussed the significance of institutions emerging as a result of choices made in the past. At first it seemed to us that path dependence can be observed if we trace some choices made in the past by actors, which leads to certain choices in the present, regardless of changing circumstances. And then an opinion was voiced, which then later seemed very reasonable to me, that these choices only allow us to speak of path dependency if they engender institutions, new institutions, which endure even under changed circumstances. So I would like to ask you, which is your vision? Do institutions allow, is it only the emergence of new institutions that allows us to speak about path dependency in each particular case? Or can there be path dependencies even without new institutions being created as a result of choices? Thank you.
Somebody else? Okay, then probably one question from me. When you give the periodization of historical professionalism, just 3 periods, I agree that these periods are quite evident. But what I'm not certain of, why do the criteria you give to describe optimum norms is themes, not attractiveness of social theories, big problems, big history, but themes. And I decided that that's happened because otherwise we could not explain this first Rankian stage. Because for me, Rankian stage mostly is a stage when historical methods as techniques were provided to historians, not as theory. And you speak about the state-centered history, but I think that state-centered history was a history from times immemorial. State-centered history was history before him and after him. But probably you had some reason to distinguish these optimum norms primarily as themes. What do you mean by themes?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's all. And now you have time to answer these questions.
Yes. Not a quite easy task, I must say. Especially the first series of questions that I got about sociology and my approach to this. I think that I try to make social organization not only not only something that is related to my philosophical and epistemic categories, but rather have it related to social organization in a more theoretical, sociological way. This is there. One may have different opinions, and those who are more acquainted with sociology than I am. I'm an outsider in sociology, even if I work with a lot of sociologists, may see differences which I don't see immediately. You have had, I'm not really, I have no possibility really, I think, to answer your first approaches to this more than this that I said now. This has been really my effort to have an open sociological mind to this. But when you came to discuss norms, and you said that you had a difficulty with my use of norms, I must say that norms are for me not only such that are loaded with ethical values. There are other types of norms. I mean, research work is filled of norms, and norms that are derived from values that are recognized by a group of people. So that is how I use it here. Norm is a rule for action that is derived from specific values that can be found out. I found it a bit concerning that you had a difficulty also to see the difference between historians, for example, and doctors and lawyers, seeing the difference in my text. If I caught you right.
No, what I was saying that I just couldn't read your interpretation that the fragment of your book that I read was stopped right when you began to talk about it. So I would very much like to know what was there.
The next page.
Okay, that I didn't catch. Okay. Yes, the answer is that researchers are not practitioners in the way that doctors and lawyers are, and they have, in fact, they have a lot of differences because their organizations are not the same and of the same type and so on. So there are, in fact, for all types of researchers, not only for historical researchers, this difference between professionals as researchers and professionals as practitioners. That I think is not so interesting as your next question, which was if you could talk of intellectual fashions instead of optimal norms, as I interpret your question.
Instead of paradigms.
Well, paradigms, okay. And intellectual fashions is really something that has been in my mind on many occasions when I wrote this, because many people would say that many of these bundles of optimal norms around certain things, microhistory, gender history, global history, whatever, that they are intellectual fashions. But I don't want to see it so, but I can't give very good reasons for that. It might be that they could be said to be fashions, but there are no very good definitions of fashions either. In that sense, fashion in clothing is much easier to pinpoint what it is, but fashion in intellectual habits, that is much more difficult. And it's possible that we come into a vicious circle of defining one with the other, as we are turning around. You had you had also, as the next speaker, a difficulty with neo-institutionalism and my interpretation of this. So let me take the two together and say that I have no intention to say that neo-institutionalists are going back to or profiting from or taking up a pattern from Ranke. That is not at all my intention. But I want to point to one specific trait which I think is important for both, and that is the embeddedness of history in institutional settings. But these institutional settings are different. North wouldn't call that institution, but organizational settings. But it doesn't matter. It is, in both cases, this type of thinking exists. With Ranke, it is foremost state institutions, state organizations, such as army or so, and different military organizations, and bureaucracy, civil bureaucracy. Both have this historical embeddedness which makes it impossible for the leader of the organization to take any decision that he wants. That is more or less exactly what North says about the leader of a private sector company, that he can't take any decision that he might want from other points of view, because he is within an institution, an organization that has an embedded history which excludes certain lines of decision making. I'm not going into every detail of this, and that makes my answer a bit not quite fitting to your comments, both of your comments, because they go much deeper. They go into questions of North's theory making, but that is not what I have been intending to do. And then, lastly, to Irina's video, the difference between Ranke then and the present, the Rankian period is characterized by dominance of optimal norms, I say, and so is the period from 1950s onwards. And this is, I think, very important for me, that for Ranke, the state was exactly, as I said earlier, something that was embedded with history and had a lot of history within it, which made the choices for those who wanted to act within the state limited. And that is, there were optimum norms also for historians that had to discover and to uncover the embeddedness of history within the state, which in a way also concerns the optimum norms that are now. The Rankian historian should deal with the state and its organs just because they were embedded with history. This is not the case with all sorts of optimum norms nowadays, that they require this or that phenomenon because they are embedded with history, but rather that those who say that they should be researched, they emphasize the field, the theme as such, and they have other motivations for this, sometimes political, sometimes they are more sociological or at least based within a social science sphere. Better, I think, I can't answer to it, but for me it is quite evident that the Rankian phase of historical professionalism was looking to an optimum norm in the first hand, an optimum norm that said that what the state was handling and was doing was the most important things in history, and it was more fruitful to deal with these than with any other.
Thank you, Rolf. And I want to share one personal record with you. 5 years ago, Poletaev and me completed 3 books simultaneously. Lena is a witness of this hard process. One was in print, one was in the one was prepared for publishing house, and the third was in a stage of fine-tuning. And we were very tired, but still sometimes we discussed the possible topic of the next book. And I said, in any case, it shouldn't be a book about historical method, historical theory, historiography, because it is boring. And he agreed. And now, 5 years after that, there was a chance to read a number of papers which were the base for your book on the problems of historical profession, method, theory, and so on. And it's really very interesting. And I will read your book, of course, now. There are many questions which just base a good soil for thinking further. And I think the strongest points for me are, first, that it's about historical profession, and historians are not inclined to think about the knowledge they produce, how they do it, according to what conventions, what is the professional society they belong to. And it's really very important to have a book written by a historian, about historians. And the other point, I think, which is of great importance, is the point about scientific revolutions in history. They are not scientific revolutions, I agree, but I think they are not, how Alisa said, intellectual fashions, because they are more than fashions, because paradigm, even if we accommodate it to social sciences, is a way of problem solving. I don't think that intellectual fashion or mode is a way of problem solving, but I think it's important to show how, which problems and how were solved when these paradigms changed. And thank you, Rolf.
Thank you.
And it was really a good evening.
Thank you, and thank you all who have commented. Thank you. In case you've gotten a chance to get our books, which are close to the topic we decided, it's from ИГИТИ.